Call to order a regular meeting for the normal local liquor commission. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Coos?
Here.
Mr. Fritzen?
Here.
Mr. Preston?
Here.
Mr. McBride?
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
Ms. Gaines?
Here.
First item to consider is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 19th, 2016, and approval of minutes of the special meeting for February 15th, 2016.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Corrections or comments? Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mayor Coos?
Aye.
Commissioner Coos?
No, one of these, yeah. There you go. On our omnibus agenda, we have the annual renewal of liquor licenses, an extensive list before you. Motion for approval to approve those licenses.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Commissioner Coos?
Aye. The licenses are approved. To give you a summary, we have Class A packaged liquor licenses. We have 31 in the community. Class B, beer by the drink, we have 1. Class C, beer and wine by the drink, we have 7. Class D, all liquor by the drink, we have 17 locations. Class E, hotels, we have 3 locations. Class M, a brew pub, we have 1 location. Class N, which is a stadium license, we have 1, and Class O, limited hours, we have 6, and that's what we've approved here tonight. We have a number of complaint and citations, settled cases, reports. Does the commission want me to go over those publicly here? So we'll take those as a whole. We have 4 different violations, 3 of which are first time, and 1 for the Walmart is a fine in the amount of $3,000. A motion for approval, please.
Move approval. Second.
Discussion or comments on these? Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Coos? Commissioner Coos?
Aye. The complaints have been settled prior to this meeting. Item 8 is a new license approval for Tony's Tacos Incorporated, doing business as Tony Tacos at 304 North Main Street. Suite C, we have received a completed application for a Class B beer only license. Motion for approval.
Move approval. Second.
Discussion on this item. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
The liquor license is approved. That concludes our business for liquor tonight, Liquor Commission tonight. Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Commissioner Coos?
Aye. Liquor Commission is adjourned. Call to order a public meeting pertaining to an annexation agreement regarding a almost 2.6 plus acre tract of land located on the north side of Rab Road, west of the Heartland Community College campus. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos?
Here.
Mr. Fritzen?
Here.
Mr. Preston?
Here.
Mr. McBride?
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
Ms. Gaines?
Here.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak pertaining to an annexation agreement regarding a 2.6 acre tract located on the north side of Rab Road, west of the Heartland Community College campus? Second time, is there anyone here wishing to speak pertaining to an annexation agreement regarding a 2.6 acre tract located on the north side of Rab Road, west of Heartland Community College campus? And third and final time, is there anyone here wishing to speak pertaining to an annexation agreement regarding a 2.6 acre tract located on the north side of Rab Road, west of the Heartland Community College campus? Motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mayor Coos?
Aye, we are adjourned, and we have a proclamation to present before we begin our regular meeting. And if my distinguished brother would step forward, he is the recipient of said proclamation. Is this, oh, it is now. I can break that down. Okay. Thank you. As everyone knows, Greg has been a icon of history and community support in this community, and after many, many years successfully operating the very well-known and well-regarded History Museum, we have a proclamation honoring his time at the museum, and I'll read that now. Whereas Greg Koos began his illustrious career with the McLean County Museum of History in 1977 and has served as community initiatives, always educating and promoting the rich history of McLean County. And whereas Greg Koos began his tenure at the McLean County Museum of History building exhibits, then as an archivist, and was ultimately selected as the executive director in 1987. And whereas Greg was an integral part of the museum team in striving to achieve and maintain national accreditation from the American Alliance of Museums, an achievement that is shared by only 3% of museums across the United States. And whereas due to the vision, hard work, and collaboration of Greg Koos, a number of local historical sites have been preserved in excellent condition, including the 1906 Adlai Stevenson II Boyhood Home on East Washington Street in Bloomington, the 1903 McLean County Courthouse, including its award-winning restored dome, the 1824 John Patton Cabin in Lexington, which is the only surviving early government building in McLean County, the 1863 Matthew T. Scott House in Chenoa, and the 1844 Miller Davis Building in downtown Bloomington, where David Davis set up his legal practice. And whereas in addition to the numerous historic sites Greg Koos has worked to preserve, he's also contributed his expertise to numerous private development preservation projects. And whereas Greg Koos has assisted in securing in private donations and grants to support local history, education, and preservation. And whereas the publications and articles scribed by Greg Koos are too numerous to name, all of which fluently define the history of McLean County. And whereas the name Greg Koos is simply a synonym for McLean County history, and whereas I am his brother, I now therefore, Chris Koos, as mayor of the town of Normal, do hereby proclaim Thursday, March 31st, 2016, as Greg Koos Appreciation Day within the town of Normal, and that all residents join me to thank Greg Koos for his 39 years of service to the McLean County Museum of History and wish him his best in his retirement. Greg? And there's the real deal. Let's get a photograph. You want to say anything?
Do I want to? Just a bit. And the thing that makes the history of this community is you, because you are building the history of this community. And it's a particular thrill on my part to receive this from my brother Chris. And also, it's a particular honor to be here in what is the center of economic energy in McLean County. We're a dynamic community. We've been around for a long time, and we're going somewhere. Thank you. Not enough.
Yeah, keep coming, come on. It's all improv, too. No, that won't work. Call to order a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for March 21st, 2016. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus.
Here?
Mr. Fritzen.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here.
Mr. McBride.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Ms. Gaines.
Here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. As always, we begin with the omnibus agenda, and these are items that are considered routine and will be handled with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion, and I would like to be excused on voting on any bills I may have incurred in my duties as mayor.
I'd like to be excused from any bills associated with my One Voice trip.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to, staff would like to pull item E for a clarification and a change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Approval.
Thank you. Items under consideration tonight are approval of the March 7th, 2016 minutes of a public hearing, actually two public hearings, and approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of March 7th, 2016. The approval of Town of Normal expenditures for payment as of March 16th, 2016. A resolution awarding the bid for concrete to the low bidder, Stark Materials Company Incorporated, at a price per cubic yard of $93.07 for high early mix and $87.40 for SI mix. And did we ever find out what SI mix was, Gene? Nobody knows, do they? Resolution awarding a bid to Diamond Vogel Paints of Bloomington, Illinois for the purchase of pavement paint and beads for an estimated total cost of $37,075. A resolution waiving the formal bidding process and authorizing an agreement with Henson Disposal of Bloomington, Illinois for processing of recyclable residential construction, demolition, and bulky waste collected by the Town of Normal. A resolution authorizing the filing of the town's Community Development Block Grant 2016-2017 Annual Action Plan. A resolution approving an agreement with TJ Development of Bloomington Corporation for the reimbursement in the amount of $202,481 for costs to construct approximately 500 feet of Shepherd Road from east of Mondavi Lane, east to Canyon Creek Road, and that's in the Vineyard subdivision. A resolution authorizing the execution of a collective bargaining agreement with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 2442, the president of which is here tonight, Dave Pauley. Dave. Resolution to approve an amended final development plan for the villas at Mercy Creek. A resolution to approve a final plat for the re-subdivision lot 5 of the villas at Mercy Creek subdivision. An ordinance authorizing the publication of a zoning map. An ordinance rezoning property in the town of Normal, that property being 303 West Willow, 409 West Willow, 212 North School, 211 North University, 210 North Main, 212 North Main, 200 Kingsley, 202 Kingsley, 302 Kingsley, 609 West College, 203 South Main Street, 205 South Main Street, 207 South Main Street, 301 South Main Street, 605 Dry Grove, 710 South Main Street, and 213 West Locust, and these are all ISU properties at this point. An ordinance amending Chapter 1 of Division 21 of the Municipal Code of the Town of Normal regarding refuse collection and disposal service. Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The omnibus agenda is approved with the exception of item E, which is a resolution approving an agreement with Boitnot's Lawn and Landscaping for mowing and abatement services effective April 1st, 2016 through March 31st, 2018. Motion for approval, please.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Yeah,
Peterson.
We're going to, I may ask that motion to be amended. Before I do that, I just want to point out, we have a very large contingent here from Henson Disposal. I wanted to point them out. Some of them have sweatshirts on with the name, and you approved that agreement tonight. But I think what's really exciting for me is with this agreement, which will allow us to divert a substantial amount of material from landfill to recycled uses, is we are optimistic that this agreement will allow our community to finally reach its 40% recycling goal, which has been a long-standing goal. We've never been able to quite get there, and estimates are that with this agreement, we'll be able to achieve that 40% goal, and I think the city of Bloomington is going in the same direction, so that's something that's worth noting. I wanted to just point that out tonight. It's important. Regarding the item before you, Boitnot Lawn Care, this was to be a 3-year agreement. Mr. McCarthy, the sharp financial mind that he has, pointed out that it's, the ordinance is written as a 2-year agreement. It's intended to be a 3-year agreement. So if you don't mind, we'd like you to amend the motion and to amend the ordinance to call for the term to be April 1 of 2016 through March 31 of 2019. So I think the...
Do we need a
the
motion on
maker
that, or?
Can the
Yeah.
maker amend the motion to just signify 2019 as the, and then the second would
I
have to do
move
the
that
same?
we amend the motion to read through 2019.
Second.
You okay with it?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That was the only change, just correcting the term. Thank you.
Is there discussion on this item going forward? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That concludes our omnibus agenda tonight. First item of general orders is a resolution approving a site plan for 602, 604, 606, and 608 South Main Street, and that has to do with the Town of Normal Fire Station headquarters that will be built upon that site.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Do we have discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That resolution is approved. The next three have to do with the hearing that we did on annexation a few moments ago, and first of which is a resolution authorizing the execution of an amended annexation agreement with Community College District Number 540 for the counties of DeWitt, Ford, Livingston, Logan, Menard, and Tazewell, and that's Heartland Community College. Somehow
approval.
McLean County got left off of that one.
Move approval.
Thank
It
you.
says McLean.
It says McLean.
Did I
It
miss
does
it?
on the next, the resolution
Okay.
title.
Discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item 8 is an ordinance annexing land to the Town of Normal, having to do with Heartland Community College. Motion for approval? Move approval. Thank you.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That ordinance is approved. Item 9 is an ordinance rezoning land to the Town of Normal, again having to do with Heartland Community College. Motion for approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That ordinance is approved as well. Item 10 is an ordinance rezoning property in the town of Normal at 501, 503, 505, 507, 509, and 511 Northville, and as well as 204 West Willow. And this has a rezoning to accommodate future development from a private developer.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item?
Just a quick question for staff. I see in the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting that Mr. McFarland requested a traffic study in the area. Will that actually be happening?
Yes, we will do that.
Thanks.
Further? Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. Item 11 is an ordinance amending an ordinance describing and designating an area located partially within the city of Bloomington, town of Normal, and unincorporated McLean County as an enterprise zone. This has to do with the Distill Brewery project in North Normal.
Move approval?
Thank you.
Second.
Discussion on this item? Ms. Lorenz?
Just a clarification, perhaps from staff, to remind me again, the nature of the business of what Distill will be doing out there. I know that there's going to be some,
The principal use will be a commercial brewery, but as part of that, they will have essentially a restaurant, they refer to as a tasting room, as well as a banquet facility. That's certainly the ultimate plan for the operation, and they've also acquired an option for additional land in order to expand those uses, and there may be some other compatible uses as well, but the principal use will be a commercial brewery.
okay, for resale in the community, or?
Yes, certainly both. If for retail sale, they will have retail sales there, but most of the product will be distributed throughout the country.
Okay. All right.
Mr. McCarthy?
I just wanted to say good luck to Distill, a local homegrown business growing, and certainly excited to have them in the town of Normal, and great that we're able to help them out. And looks like most everybody's already signed off on this, and I hope everybody else does, so we can get this deal done and grow some jobs here locally and continue to see a local company do well here. So that's it.
Thank you. Further on the item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance for the enterprise zone is approved. Item 12 is an ordinance amending Division 7 of the Municipal Code having to do with water rates. Motion for approval.
Move approval?
Second.
Discussion on this item? Ms. Lorenz?
You know, I probably went around the block on this 2 or 3 times. I want to thank the staff for putting up with all of my questions. But in particular, I think that I just want to comment in a positive way that a great deal of analysis has been put into this. I appreciate the scenario analysis of what if we didn't do this raise, slight as it may be, and I appreciate the staff's analysis of that. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. McCarthy?
Just dovetailing a little bit on my counterpart, thank you for the great work, as always, from our finance department, laying out scenarios. Just did want to clarify, in the packet, it was great to see and remind us that we're voting on this raise for 1 year.
Correct.
And that we'll get to see this again next year. And that I imagine that if we find ourselves in a scenario like we were the last 2 years and didn't need a water rate increase, if it actually does follow those scenarios and we get above our 20%, we won't need to continue to levy at 2% in some years.
You're absolutely right. We evaluate this every year, and we may determine next year there's no increase. Hopefully, that's the case. But we did want to be prepared that we are looking at that if we need it, but our hope is we can avoid it.
Fritzen?
Just a question I had as I read through it, reviewed the numbers. was part of the, as part of the council when we did the rate study previously that really got us back in a positive position, both operationally and for capital expenses. But I don't recall the reason we landed at a 20% balance target where, we, over the last few years, we've tried to work our general fund balance up to 15% from 10, and we have gradually gotten to that point. Was the reason for the 20% because of the potential for major capital needs? Is that why we have that maybe a little higher than the other? I'm looking for just some reasoning for that balance being that percentage.
Sure, that's essentially correct. And remember, the 20% in the water fund is working off a much smaller base, so it's still a much smaller number. The general fund is 15% of total general fund expense. That's a very large base, so in terms of actual dollars, a much bigger number. Given the relative size of the water fund compared to the general fund, and given, as you said, the potential for the need for a major capital project in which we're not afforded the luxury of time to prepare for and pre-fund, it's generally regarded, 20% is generally regarded as a very prudent level to maintain in an enterprise fund such as this one. So that it's a bit of an industry standard within these types of enterprise funds, given the size. If the fund was much larger, we could probably afford to drop that percentage down a little bit.
Thank you.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. Item 13 is an ordinance authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement pertaining to the Uptown Circle Phase 2 project involving the construction and operation of a mixed-use building in Uptown Normal.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Before we go to discussion or questions, I think, Mr. Peterson, do you have comments?
Yeah, I'd like to call up representatives of the project team, Doug Reichel specifically, who's the lead person representing the developer, and Matt Wiley, who's the lead designer. And as they come up, I think they've got some slides to share. Guys want to come on up and just a couple of comments as they're coming up. I think I put something in the report. This has been kind of a long and winding road that we've taken to get here. We purchased the subject property, which some of us will remember as the Commerce Bank property back in 2007, notwithstanding the city clerk. She insisted it was the Bank of Illinois, but rarely is she wrong when it comes to history, but I got her on this one. But it has been a long time, so we kind of forget what was there. And another property that contributed to this site, some of you may remember Abe's Caramel Corn, that we purchased, I think, in '03, I believe, and we used that building as the Uptown office for a few years. And that, of course, has been since taken down. But we have had a number of starts and stops with this project. Most recently, of course, the current, at least part of the current development team was selected by the council back in 2011 to move this project forward. We entered into a formal development agreement in 2012. And at that time, we were talking about a $32 million total project that included a limited-service hotel and a mixed-use building that would focus on residential, but it would have some commercial use as well, particularly retail. It was later determined or requested by the developer that we split the project into two phases, and we all know Phase 1 has been successfully completed, and the Hyatt Place Hotel is operating very successfully, and I think it's a fantastic addition to our uptown landscape. And now they're ready to proceed with Phase 2, which is the mixed-use building, adding an office component, but still primarily residential with a ground-level retail or restaurant component. I will say again, we were projecting initially a $32 million total investment in the project. That would include public and private monies. That has grown now to roughly $42 million. So the hotel itself was roughly $28 million, and this project is projected to be a little over $14 million. So it has grown in scope, and I think it's, in my opinion, it's a very impressive project and one that certainly I'm excited to see finally happen. We get the hole in the ground filled for good will be nice, so we won't have those questions as we go out in the community. And I get that question still quite frequently, even though part of the hole's been filled with that beautiful Hyatt Place Hotel. But I thought it would be helpful to hear from the design team, particularly Mr. Wiley, as well as Doug Reichel, who's been the lead on this project from day one, a little bit more detail about their plans, and then if you have specific questions about the agreement or any other details about the project, we'd be happy to try to address those as well.
Matt, why don't you, I think maybe the best way to do this is to have Matt kind of walk through the design of the project, and then when he's through, we can start fielding questions.
Great.
I'm just going to take you through the floor plans from bottom to top. And for this project, the bottom is actually down in the hole. So we do have a parking garage beneath the development with private parking for the residents of the building. There's a basic amount of service down in that area, as well as tenant storage. One thing that's a significant change from what you've seen in the past is the access to that garage is actually from Buford Street instead of off the alley. In the time between when we last saw you and now, I think the decision of the team was that really the alley was too taxed to provide adequate service to the North Street retail and for the ground floor retail as well as the hotel. So that's a significant change. You can see the ramp comes in off of Buford, which is down at the bottom of this slide, and kind of curls in, providing then a total of 22 parking spaces. Going up to what is the main floor, the ground floor, the large blue area is the retail restaurant space that we have planned right now. It's up on the circle, so it has full benefit of your beautiful heart of your community there. Lobby entrance for residents as well as for the second floor commercial office space is off of Buford, again here at the bottom. Residential entry is right here in the center of the plan. And for elevator access to the commercial office, they will share those elevators with the residents. There is a separate entrance directly into this stairwell that takes you up to the second floor commercial office space. The orange-colored spaces are lounge and community residential amenities on the ground floor. All blue. Commercial office, second floor, the entire area.
Did you just want to go back to that with the
Sure.
retail and just go through the orientation, just the, main entrance?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, good point. Since we last saw you, the entrance into the commercial development is actually pulled up into this northeast corner up on the circle. I think everybody felt that having that space participate with the streetscape along north was an important change to make to assure the success. So we've essentially, it's essentially the same space, but the entrance and orientation are now focusing on North Street. We do show a certain amount of good weather private dining up along the circle as well. Second floor, all commercial office space, wide open floor plate. It's this stairwell right here that circulates up from Buford and provides direct access for that commercial floor. This is the third floor. Third floor and fourth floor are identical in terms of their composition. We've got 21 residential units. That's fewer than what we presented the last time. I think the last time we were in front of you formally might have been 33 units. So we've got somewhat less in terms of the total number of units. Mixture on the typical floor of one bedrooms shown here in blue and the other color are the two-bedroom units in a double-loaded corridor configuration. The gray are services on that floor. Each floor has tenant storage for each unit, for larger items on the floor, as well as trash and recycling facilities. The fifth floor was added to, in response to some comments that we got from staff, that some additional height might not be a bad idea from what we'd originally, or had been headed toward planning, which is a 4-story building. On the fifth floor, we've got a one-bedroom unit shown in blue, a 3-bedroom unit in yellow, right at the corner of Buford and the Circle, and a 2-bedroom building. The idea is that these two buildings, although not identical, are built to the same quality and use similar materials. You get a good peek in this view of the Beaufort Street private terraces at the top of the building off of the 5th floor units. The canopy element on the Circle is a little bit different. We've always had that first floor under cover, but it used to be that the building was pulled forward, and Arcade provided that cover. Now the building is pushed back a bit from the Circle, and we have a canopy that provides that protection outside of the ground floor restaurant space. Same orientation, but a bit lower, gives you a sense of some of the detail. One of the major changes on the outside of the building is the addition of this commercial floor. So the glazing, the window pattern at that second floor takes on a very different character from the window pattern of the floors above. And coming around to the North Street entrance, which is right here, into the ground floor restaurant space. We do have this 2-story brick element that sort of picks up the scale, or is intended to pick up the scale of the North Street retail buildings. And from the corner of Beaufort and Broadway, looking back toward the Circle. Our pool building for the hotel is located right here in the foreground. You don't get a great view of it, but we've actually taken that mass and slid it under into the entryway to create the entryway for the second floor commercial office space, kind of integrating the two buildings or interlocking the two buildings. And looking down at the alley and backside of the development. And a good shot at the North Street facade. These next two images show the quality of the spaces that we are currently in planning on back at the office. The idea is to have apartments that are contemporary in nature with an urban sensibility, light, bright, airy, higher ceilings, large windows to capitalize on the views surrounding the site. And in quality materials, you can see that we've shown here rendered a hardwood floor, stone or quartz, countertops, some beautiful tile selections. The idea is to have a environment that's generally neutral in character, though high quality, so that whatever your taste is, you can come in and it'll fit right in. So couldn't help but render the view from one of the private terraces. This happens to be the one that's on the corner of Beaufort and the Circle, looking off toward the east, I guess. Building we're in is right here. I think that's our last slide. So, Doug, unless you had something else you want to say, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I think we can open it up to questions.
Ms. Gaines?
Questions. One is, I'm just curious, because it looks like the entranceway for the apartments and for the second floor office space is going to be one and the same. Are the upper floors going to be locked with the elevator so that they can't?
Yeah, we would be
people can't just
using
go and wander?
swipe or fob technology within the elevator CAD.
Okay.
And possibly programming so that there's time as a security measure, access to floor 2 limited to certain times,
Okay.
so.
I was just curious about that. And then the other thing, is there any rooftop or space for the lower level apartments for any kind of going out in the sunshine kind of thing?
Well, we have an area up there that,
I thought I saw it, but,
yeah, I mean, this has kind of been pushed and pulled, and we've done various things. So, I mean, right now, we're dealing with costs. So Matt has an area that's up there that's targeted, and it's contemplated that, you know, should the budget allow it, or if in the future it allows it, it's designed and could be utilized for that purpose. I mean, it's certainly our hope to do it, but we didn't want to come in here and show things that potentially get removed later. So
Right.
it's there
I understand.
for future.
Okay, they're just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if we could do it, so I don't know if you want to, if you can point
Right.
out.
This area right here along Beaufort is the area designated. for
So the end of the corridor would actually open directly out onto that space.
Oh, okay. Well, it looks lovely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions for development team here? Mr. Preston?
Yeah, I've got one. On the slide that outlined level 2, it showed a square footage, rentable square footage number of 12,940, is that correct? Yeah. For tenant space and,
Usable square footage.
okay. And elsewhere, we've seen the number 13,780. Is that, explain to me the difference between those two square footage figures in terms of what's actual rentable square
Yeah,
face compared
right.
to total, compared to whatever?
So the usable is between the four walls, and the rentable number is actually, there's elements of the building, corridors, you know, common area spaces and the rest of it that are attributable to that space. So there's a whole exhibit, I don't know if it's part of the package, but it's certainly would be part of the lease, where those areas are identified and calculated. There's an organization, BOMA, which is kind of the standard that governs all of this stuff. So we actually took something less than what BOMA would actually allow and identified those areas. So that's the difference. One's actually the four walls, the other one's what is rentable or what you would pay rent on.
Ms. Lorenz?
So to follow up to that, which would it be that the tenant would be looking at?
The rentable number, because,
Okay.
so that you're paying for those in addition to just what you have between the four walls. You're being allocated your kind of pro rata share of, you know,
Common.
the water room
Yeah,
and those
okay,
things that
okay.
are needed to service that space.
Got it.
And that's all something that we will have to verify once we have final design plans. These are conceptual floor plans, but that's all something that we'll need to verify that we're being charged for exactly, you know, what we're using and what's appropriate. I think the estimate was 13,780, something like that, and obviously that's something we'll have to confirm once we have final design.
Mr. Fritzen?
Two things. First floor restaurant is what is anticipated there. Are we confident that that's what it's going to be? And I know we've made it pretty clear we're looking for something
Yeah.
a little upscale from the typical offering here. And what kind of capacity does that square footage accommodate?
I could hazard a guess. I'm not, you know,
Yeah.
it's probably, I'm guessing about 150 people, maybe a little bit more, depending on private dining and how that gets allocated. But back to your initial question, I mean, we've reached out to a number of people. We kind of had it ranked, and the group that we were most interested in is also interested. We've had numerous conversations, and, I would be, hopeful that we could announce that, in the near term. So, we agree, that's the money shot, right? That's the piece that everyone's looking at, and, we will take care to see that it's the right restaurant.
Not that we don't have enough restaurants in Bloomington Normal, but, because of the nature of the community, I mean, a little turnover, a little new property every so often is something
Yeah,
the community, I
this
think,
is
looks
someone-
forward to and anticipates, so.
Independent that's operating in the market currently at a high level, that understands, kind of what we're looking to achieve, and that's a shared vision that they have, so.
Of course, the expectation for parking for retail would be that they use the parking garages that we've constructed uptown, and of course, the surface parking that is available, but has that been an issue at all with any of the people you've talked to?
No one's mentioned it, but I think until I can say for the hotel, I ask all the time, how do the guests, we haven't had a lot of pushback, I mean, it's less desirable than maybe having the pedway, but that's it, it's a comment, and it hasn't hurt us. So I would imagine the same thing would take place here. People figure it out, they know there's availability, it works well, right? That deck empties out as, the evening's kind of building, so I don't anticipate a problem with it.
I think really, maybe for staff, and I asked Mr. Peterson this a little bit earlier, but just walk us through a little bit about concerning the payback on the project, because, there's a considerable public investment on the whole block, not just this part of it. Obviously, we've made that commitment. We, put most of it in the Phase 1 with the Hyatt, and
Right.
there's some here, but in addition here, we are looking at, really looking at our future with Uptown 2, and looking at, leasing this second floor initially for our uses, and really kind of taking the first step towards putting Uptown 2 into motion if we follow through with this. So, but obviously there's property tax, there's food and beverage tax, there's several different streams of revenue available to us here. So the report mentions payback, but that we, our upfront investment will be paid back through the receipt of new tax revenue, but timeline, those types of things.
Yeah.
I'm curious how that maps out.
A good question. When we first looked at this overall project, again, we were talking a smaller project in terms of total investment at that time. Back in 2011, 2012, we did quite a bit of analysis on payback, and you hit the primary payback sources, Mr. Fritz, and certainly the largest share would be through real estate taxes captured by the TIF. That TIF expires in 2026, I believe, if it's not extended. At this point, we don't contemplate seeking an extension, but it's something, depends on what's going on down there. It's something we haven't closed the door on that possibility. But, so it at the end of 2026, then we'll no longer realize additional revenue from the TIF. And then the other three sources are sales taxes, food and beverage taxes, which of course primarily coming from the retail of Uptown Phase 2, a little bit from the hotel, but not a huge amount. And then, of course, from the hotel, the lodging tax, the hotel motel tax. So we, our total investment in the project to be $7.85 million. We were projecting back then about a 20-year payback. That still is probably about right, given the fact that now we've got a little bit bigger project. EAV is likely to be a little higher than we anticipated, but because of the delays in construction, we've got less time to capture that through the TIF. So that will probably balance out. sales tax and food and beverage tax is going to depend a lot on the restaurant, and from what again, the developer's been able to share with staff some of their initial discussions, and the direction they're heading certainly exciting. I think it's great potential at that location to be a significant generator. But all in all, our initial projection we think is about right, roughly 15 to 20 years, probably leaning closer to 20 when it's all said and done. It's still a little early on the Hyatt. We're keeping an eye on the Hyatt, but it's, hasn't been open even a year now. So until they reach a stabilization, which is maybe a couple of years in, we'll have a much better idea how they're performing, the kind of hotel lodging tax they're generating, and sales tax, so we'll know a lot more. But at this point, we haven't seen anything from that facility that gives us concern that they're not going to meet the mark. We typically project a little conservatively, and I think we've done that here. So we've built in some room in the event that things don't take off as quickly as we'd hope they would. But those are the four major sources of payback, and we remain confident that, we'll eventually get 100% of our investment back. And I think that's the way to look at this, as an investment in a tremendous new development in Uptown, which not only will generate revenue in and of itself, but it should also help to pave the way for future residential projects in this urban setting, which right now, and Mr. Reichel will attest, it's been hard to get lenders to buy into a product that doesn't exist anywhere in the market. That's a challenge, and that's made this project particularly difficult. But once this is tested and is occupied, many of those lending fears will be put to rest, and it should be easier for future residential projects to be financed.
Yeah, I imagine the payback on the tracking of the Hyatt property, the impact of it, and it won't be felt for some time, and it doesn't stand alone, because we are counting on, with our conference center across the street managed by the Marriott and the Marriott property itself, our expectation, obviously, that the two work in tandem to maybe bring some business here that previously would not come here. So those additional rooms, can help us beyond the property itself.
And I might add, we believe that's happening already. Just in information we received from the Marriott, they are up significantly this year over last year. In part, they attribute to the additional rooms available in the Hyatt. When we did our calculations on hotel motel tax, we didn't attribute any additional revenue to the Marriott. Well, that's probably going to happen to some degree. It's hard to estimate that, but there will be some revenue to the Marriott, as well as revenue to other local Uptown businesses and restaurants that will spin off from the Hyatt. And we specifically did not include that sort of spin-off revenue that we knew was naturally going to happen, because it's simply hard to measure. So you're right, those things appear to be already taking place, and that's one of the hidden benefits of the Hyatt. It's given the Marriott a little bit of an assist.
One other thing regarding the lease by the town of the second floor there. Presently, we're not in a position where we have to do this for our own purposes. Engineering is in a building we own, and inspections is in the old city hall, and planning, and yet, I think as I work through this, I can make a case for doing what we're doing here. The opportunity's there. The opportunity was there when we bought the building. Engineering is in now, and we didn't necessarily need it at the time, but although Mr. Brown may take issue with that because he wanted to get out of that apartment building. But is it pretty much the fact that, the opportunity presents itself now to do something that maybe might be a little bit ahead of its need date, but yet the opportunity is there, and it brings it right across the street from where we are now? Walk us through the thinking of, why do that at this point in time?
It's a good question. That's certainly part of it. The opportunity presents itself. It's a wonderful location. I mean, a fabulous location. It is convenient for our staff. But also, let's get back to the difficulty of getting this project financed. You know, the numbers are thin here. I mean, this is not going to be well, we hope it's going to be a grand slam, but it's not an easy project. And the developer, frankly, has struggled to make the numbers work. They're still working with a local contractor to analyze the details of the design and to try to, you know, fit this beautiful building into their budget parameters. And one of the things, frankly, that made a big difference is our willingness to take that second floor. It eliminated the need to expend all the money on build-out of apartments, and it allowed them to go to the lenders with an institutional tenant that was willing to take the space for 15 years at a very, you know, good rent. $20 a square foot is about the top of the market in Bloomington Normal for office space, which this should be, frankly. This is the nicest office in town. So we're doing it in part because we obviously need the move. It's convenient, it works well for us, but it also makes the project viable. And I don't want to understate that. Now, we've written the lease in such a way as if some other private company comes in and they're interested in that space for the same terms, we can turn it over. We'll probably have to pry Mr. Brown out of there because he's been in makeshift facilities for a long time, and to have a nice new office will be wonderful for he and his staff as well as inspections and planning. But you know, if there's an opportunity to nurture another private business that wants to come make an investment in Uptown, and that's the office space they want, we would try to find another alternative for our staff. So it's a combination of, you know, it's a great opportunity for us, but it also, I think, goes a long way to make this a viable project in terms of their ability to get financing.
Yeah, anything to add to that, Mr. Reichel?
I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, we have gone out to the market, and we've got 3 lenders that have expressed interest in the project, and the primary reason is the fact that you walk in with a commitment from the town, so you've got that primary piece already secured. I mean, as Mark points out, you know, to make this all work, we've continued to kind of push the rents, really beyond any rent that's in central Illinois. So the comparable that we're going to need in order to get the appraisal to work is going to rely heavily on, you know, this lease that we have with the town. And the same thing, that the apartments are expensive to build, and being able to remove that cost, as he said, out of the equation helped. And, you know, honestly, you've got, it matches up the parity to parking to units. It made a lot more sense. There's now 21 units, there's 22 spaces downstairs. You know, and I think in an urban environment, having that mixed-use element really adds to kind of what we're trying to do here. So I think it worked in all areas.
Mr. Riker, you might also speak to the construction quality, which I know is obviously to command the kind of rents you're looking for in the apartments, it's got to be a high-quality building, and I know you were struggling with that with budget, trying to cut back on, and now you're able to go to I think, pretty much an all-steel building, which is
Yeah,
huge.
we've worked with Core really from the beginning. They kind of joined the team on a pre-development, and we've gone back and forth from wood to the various different structures. You know, we're inheriting what was originally designed, that, you know, if we had it to do over, we wouldn't have had that geometry. It's that radius is very difficult and expensive to design around, and that's honestly what we've had. But as Mark points out, you know, some of the back and forth in order to deliver the quality of the building that the town's looking for up on the circle, and the things that we needed to do, you know, with the addition of the office space, we have been able to put a little bit more money into the structural piece of it, and this is going to be a steel structure. I mean, this is a high-quality building that we're now able to build. So whoever moves in there is going to have a very nice apartment.
Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you. First, I want to say how excited I am to, I've been on the council about 3.5 years, and I know my more experienced counterparts have been waiting for this a lot longer, so it's great to be talking about this in terms of 90 days instead of undetermined amount of time. So, and I appreciate your persistence on the financial side of trying to figure out how to make this project work. I do want to add to Mr. Peterson's comments and Mr. Reichel's comments that also as we look at our Uptown 2.0 movements, that for us to have a solution for part of our staffing right in front of us starts to make the planning and the execution timeline perhaps for 2.0, some of those barriers to be done are removed all that more rapidly for us. So there's a lot of moving parts between original Uptown and Uptown 2.0, and this is helping to solve one of those. I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that as well as we take on a lease for our office space. Just a quick question on the whole layout. I believe it was on the second floor, community room and lounge. Can you just give me an idea of what you're thinking about for that? Tell us what you're planning or thinking about.
Yeah, over the course of, trying to figure out what we were going to do, Mark and staff have arranged some meetings, and I've, met with some folks that would have an interest in leasing, and, we probed, what are the amenities you're looking for, and what I was a little bit surprised by was fitness wasn't really at the top of that. We had originally programmed it as fitness space. Mm-hmm. So what they did want, probably most people moving out of a house larger, they wanted a place to be able to have people over. So the community space would function as that. Birthday party, any of that kind of stuff. There'll be a kitchen area in there, refrigerator, all that stuff. Backs up to the loading dock. If you have things coming in, it's very convenient. The lounge, currently, that's contemplated as, almost like a hotel lobby where, there's seating venues where, if you just want to go out of the apartment and sit down there and read the paper or whatever, and that's really kind of a visual for people walking by as well. There might be a card table or something, just space for people to use in common with, with the other residents. So that's the contemplation. The lobby, there'll be a small sitting area, but we're not, that's more visual than it is actually, gathering.
Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz?
Well, I'm new to the table here, so I have some concerns over the amount of that we're bringing to the table. But from the bond dollars to the guaranteed lease for 15 years, to the I think $750,000 build out, if my math is correct.
We're
that
providing the dollars for the build-out.
You are.
Yeah, so that's part of what we're giving you the space plus the allowance.
Okay, so help me understand what that additional $350 a square foot is.
Well, it's amortizing in the rent payment, but
Okay.
you're not paying, you're paying us back, I guess, is
Okay.
for clarification.
Okay. So, and what I'm hearing, again, trying to catch up with history a little bit, is that pulling out any one of these pieces is in a precarious project that what you're telling me is that the financials are just that precarious.
Yeah, yes, we've studied this to the extent that you can study it when it's not actually designed, The process that you go through is you build a model, and you start with the rent and the revenue, and you kind of figure out, you need a return, and then you figure out what you can pay for it. And you know, as we've gone through this, it really hasn't been viable. The cost of the project, the revenue isn't enough to achieve the return. So, you know, I've kind of been back and forth with Mark, we've met with the contractors, we've done all that, and, you know, quite honestly, as Mark pointed out, the missing piece was the removal of the residential units from that floor and the cost associated with doing that, and replacing it with a less expensive office use, kind of moved this above that hurdle line and made it viable. And just, you know, we've met with Core, and you can only do so much off of sketches and some drawings. Now it's, you know, Matt and his team needs to get into the details and draw it, but there's still a gap. I mean, we're still fighting costs to get there, but at some point, you gotta just jump in and try to figure it out. And we think we're at that point where we're willing to take on that risk predicated on other projects we've been involved in and things that we think that we can do as we move through. But it is, as you point out, a precarious kind of a deal.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Preston and Ms. Gaines.
Thanks. I'm not sure if this first question is for staff or for the developer, but picking up a little bit off of what Ms. Lorenz was talking about with relation to the rent. So the additional base rent per foot of $350, that is money that we will be, in essence, reimbursing the developer for in regards to the expense for the build-out. Did I see correctly in the lease that we're also, is this a triple net lease? Are we, in addition to what is being
Right.
shown on our base rent schedule, we'll also be paying our share based by square footage, and I think it's important that all of us recognize that, of the prorated amount of real estate taxes and other expenses that the larger building
Yeah,
requires.
I
Is
don't
that right?
anticipate that's Cam, because you're probably just going to maintain your space. So, but yes, is the answer. It's triple net.
Do we have any projections to how much money we're talking?
I mean, I guess we're projecting taxes to probably be around $4 a square foot. You know, I think we've asked the assessor just preliminarily, and you're probably 30 cents in insurance, and, you know, Cam might be another 50 cents.
Okay, so just so I understand, the total
Sure.
rent we're talking for this space is $20 base rent that will increase 2% a year. The additional base rent as build-out reimbursement for $350, plus give or take another probably $5 a foot to reimburse those other expenses if,
Yeah, and, I mean, the bulk of that is all the taxes.
Yeah.
So for your first year of occupancy, probably not going to, it'll be negligible, because it's zero currently, and I think it takes the assessor typically 3 years to get to the full assessment. So by year 3, you will be paying that full assessment of taxes. But for year 1 and year 2, year 1 negligible, year 2 would probably be, I don't know, half of what it ultimately will be.
okay. Yeah, another question, in the redevelopment agreement, Article 6, subset 5, that talks about the office lease, it says the town agrees to lease the office space at the project for a period of 10 years, and yet our lease is 15. I'm wondering.
Should be 15, I think. It was, I think we changed that. Or what section, Scott? you-
Yep.
Yeah,
Article
6.5.
6, Section 5, it's 1328
Yeah,
in
it
our
should,
packet.
that should say 15, thank you for,
Where'd the 15-year mark come from? Because as we're looking at Uptown 2.0 and the volatility of the situation as we continue to hopefully develop this area, you know, if the situation changes, you know, pretty drastically in the next 10 years, which we're hoping to, I would think that there would maybe be some benefit for us to, beyond just the ability to sublet, have the flexibility of space and not be locked in for such a long time, being the 15 years. And that's also, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, for office space can be, market appropriate to have anywhere between 5 and 15. I mean, 10 years is just as common in the marketplace for this kind of lease as 15 is, if I'm correct. And I'm wondering where the 15-year number came from.
10's where we started, and I think you got some feedback. that-
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a credit enhancement to the lenders or anything to have a credit-worthy tenant in there for that additional period to have that hangout beyond the initial loan. So there is definite advantages to that. And then, you know, you're obviously amortizing the improvements over that 15 years, so that makes that a little bit more palatable. So I just assume institutional tenants don't typically move that frequently, so that the longer commitment with the benefit of amortizing that seemed like it was an appropriate ending point. I mean,
Yeah, we felt that way. Certainly, it would be our expectation to stay there. We did want the flexibility to sublease or transfer the lease if some other tenant who we felt would be a very valuable addition to the Uptown saw that space and wanted it and needed it. And that assumes that we can find comparable space ourselves. We may not be able to. But it would be our intent at this point to stay for the full 15 years, maybe even renew beyond that. But certainly, we did want to have the option to turn that space over to someone else if an opportunity presented itself.
I guess just a thought, if I may, to kind of wrap up some of the answers I'm getting from the questions I've been asking. Overall, with the redevelopment agreement, with everything that you guys have put forth and the work you've been spending, I'm sure, a lot of time on for a lot of months and a couple of years, I think it's fantastic. This is getting up off the ground. That this project is finally coming to fruition. As Mr. McCarthy and others have commented before, we've been looking at a hole for far too long, and I think this community has too. And we're excited that it's going to be filled with something that is of such quality and really fits Uptown extremely well, I think, both in terms of tenants. I mean, you know, the idea of having a restaurant on the first floor, the opportunity for non-student residential up above is long overdue, and all of those things I'm very excited about. On the flip side, I am somewhat conflicted, as Mr. Peterson recognized earlier. You know, when we're talking starting this 15-year lease at a total of $23.50 plus estimates would say another $5 or so a foot in rent, you know, that is the top of the market already. And it's our job, I think, up here to also balance the excitement of this project with the fact that it's the people of Normal's money that is going to this top of the market rent that is being paid each month. And making sure that we're not getting a bad deal for our residents, I think, is an important aspect to keep in mind in all of this. And I'm not suggesting that we aren't because of the space or getting the project going, but merely looking at the total amount of rent compared to the, you know, to the space that we'd be provided within the marketplace is something that caused me a little concern. So I'm conflicted overall on the project. Fantastic, love it. It merely comes down to how we've structured this lease, the length of the lease, and the money involved that makes me kind of question exactly how all of that end of it is coming together. Thanks.
Ms. Gaines?
Well, I guess I want to answer that a little bit, because we can talk about, are we concerned about that bit of extra money? Well, we've been sitting on the space for, what has it been, over 10 years, and not getting any tax money from it. It's been sitting there as a hole. It's been an eyesore. It hasn't been followed through on what we had promised other people who were coming and putting their money on the table for Uptown Normal. And the other thing that's going to come out of this, yes, we may be paying some of that back and paying some for the tax, but at the same time, this is going to build this building. It's going to help build this building. And we're not renting it because we don't need it. We are going to need space. There's no question about it. We have 2.0 happening there, and we can't just sit in an old dentist's office when we're changing that out. We're going to need space. And by being there, and this helps get this built, we're going to be increasing taxes. We are going to, the tax value for the Uptown. It is going to be returning back to us a lot. And I think that sometimes that gets lost a little bit when we start thinking, well, that, we're thinking about the pennies when really we have to kind of think about the dollars in the long run. So I guess I'm just saying that in hopes that it helps a little bit for people who who get a little nervous about this. Uptown Normal has been an extreme success. We have brought, just not the town itself per se, but because we've helped push this and we've had to make other deals at the very beginning to get people to come and put their money there, put their money where their mouth is. And they have come there, and how many millions of dollars have been brought into Uptown Normal that is increasing our tax base, so that people, citizens who are sitting in their homes, are going to be able to be allowed much better services in the long run for a lot lower tax rate, because it's not all having to come from their own personal property tax. And so that's kind of how I have seen it. That's how we've talked about it over all these years. We've kind of been pulling that together. So I don't want anybody hearing this conversation and thinking, geez, are we getting ripped off as a community? Well, I don't believe we're getting ripped off for a minute. I believe that we are actually stepping up and going to have great space for our engineering department and all that they need to have. But we're also getting a building built that, for many years, I'm really kind of sick of hearing about the hole, to be quite honest with you. It's been a long time coming. And the other piece to this to remember is this spot, we got stuck with it because somebody came in there and they started the foundations and all of this work was laid out there. And then that wasn't going to work. So we needed somebody who was willing to come in and make it work. And it's probably been more expensive than if you would have said, well, let's tear the whole stupid thing out and start over again. But we're trying to make it work and fit into that space. So this has been a tough one. This has probably been just about the toughest piece of property that we've had to deal with. And so I'm kind of relieved, and I'm really excited. It's going to be beautiful, and it's going to add a whole nother dimension to our community. So that is my sermonette on that. So thank you for listening.
Mr. McBride.
Well, I'll try to articulate my thoughts without repeating too much of what others have said here tonight. And I certainly understand the concerns I'm hearing from some of my colleagues. I mean, whenever you are talking about the kind of figures involved, yes, that's why we're here. We have a responsibility to the taxpayers and the residents of Normal to manage money responsibly, and I think we do that. A couple of words, though, that I haven't heard here tonight are vision. Let's stick to the vision. I haven't heard the word investment. I think this is an investment by our community in something very important. I think this project does two things. It eliminates maybe the only sore point that we've had throughout the Uptown development to this point, and it's the first domino to fall, as somebody mentioned earlier, for Uptown 2.0. So I'm pretty excited about that. I also think that we should point out just two more things. I give a lot of credit to staff for being resourceful and nimble in coming up with a creative solution. And I also think, to throw another word out there, and that's pilot. I think what we're looking at is a pilot project to show that office space can work in Uptown, be that Uptown 1.0 or Uptown 2.0. And I think it's a pilot to show that residential space can work to a larger extent in Uptown 1.0 or 2.0. So again, I understand some of the concerns and the reluctance, but I'm also pretty excited about being able to move forward. 15 years, by the way, for a lease sounds like a long time, but by the time we move in there, we will have been trying to get this thing done for almost 15 years. Just another way to look at it.
I'm going to make a brief comment on that, too. Just looking back at the history of it, since we started with history tonight. By anybody's standards, Uptown Normal has been considered a success. It's been modeled by other communities. It's drawn national attention. And I will tell you, having been involved in that from the start, I can't name one easy project that we did. There was not one project that was easy, that we didn't go through the same exercise we're going through here tonight to talk about this, because we're trying to do something different. We're trying to do something nicer than is usually done in the community, and that what we have accomplished so far as a unit of government in cooperation with some very talented and visionary developers has made Uptown what it is today. And to me, this is another very difficult project, but at the end of the day, it will shine with the rest of the buildings in Uptown Normal. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. That concludes our general orders here tonight, and we have a couple of items of new business. The first is a motion to approve reappointments to various boards and commissions. Motion for approval of that, please.
Second.
As this is a matter of personnel, there will be no discussion, unless a council member would like to take this to executive session for discussion. And seeing no such request, would you please call the roll?
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. Again, these are reappointments and new appointments. And Ms. Gaines, would you read those,
We have
please?
some reappointments, and we want to thank all of these folks for doing the job so far and be willing to sign up again for this. On the Historic Preservation Commission, we're reappointing Kristen Allen. On the Human Relations Commission, Quincy Cummings. Planning Commission, Bob Broad. Planning Commission, Mike Matika. Uptown Design Review Commission, Barbara Fuller. Sister City Commission, Leticia Montes de Oca. Sister City Committee, Toyoka Nishiara Johnson. I'm sorry if I've slaughtered your name. And the new appointments, both for the sister cities, is Mrs. Dawn Sadikoff, and she's been involved with the Sayakawa Sister City Commission as a teacher chaperone for a trip in 2015. So she's a graduate of Illinois Wesleyan and Illinois State University, and she's lived in her current home in Normal since 2012, and we thank her. And also Mr. Jesse Paul Padilla. Mr. Padilla, a legal professional and area resident for 8 years, is welcoming an opportunity to serve on the Sister City Committee. He's been actively involved in our community since he arrived here, and we just hope we just hope they have good experiences, and we do thank them for their service to come.
Thank you. Item 15 is a presentation to council by Vasu Pinamajaru of the McLean County Regional Planning Commission pertaining to the Town of Normal Comprehensive Plan Update Process, which will be going underway anytime soon.
As Vasu comes up, and Mercy's going to join her, I believe, it has been underway. A lot of work has already been done. I think we started last August with our first initial kickoff meeting, and at a staff level, a lot of work has been done, and already a lot of good community input's been received that I think Vasu is going to summarize for you here today, so look forward to her presentation.
Respected Mayor and members of council, Mr. Manager, thank you so much for this opportunity to present here today. This presentation probably is the first of many to come as we go through this process for the next year and a half or so. What I'll be presenting here today is the first couple of phases of the planning process, which is existing conditions analysis and community outreach. But before I go through my presentation, I definitely would like to take a minute to thank the steering committee, which is key members of staff, including Mr. Peterson, and definitely Mercy Davison, who's been incredibly resourceful, without whose help we couldn't be doing what we did on existing conditions. Again, I'll keep this to fairly high-level information. The two key pieces of information that we'll be presenting here today is a whole bunch of data and numbers. I'll try not to hit you with too many numbers, but a brief analysis of each of these. So what can you expect today is definitely not answers, but more questions on how we go about this. It was interesting for me to watch the previous presentation on the hole in the ground. I know many of you said you all wanted to see that happen. As part of community outreach, if there was one thing that we definitely heard, that was to see something happen in the hole in the ground. So I'm actually very excited about that myself. And to some degree, I feel silly saying this, sitting in Uptown Normal and knowing that this council has made this Uptown happen and also adopted Uptown 2.0, but I really think we should all put our future goggles. This is Comprehensive Plan 2040. That is 25 years from now. We can't predict most things 25 years into the future, but what we can absolutely predict is change. If we look back 25 years, 1990, we have come a long way, probably way far than what we have ever imagined. That's probably what we're going to look 25 years from now. So some of the things might seem like, why are we even looking at this information? I definitely want, when you have that question, please put on your future goggles. Hopefully we'll be able to answer in the subsequent stages. So for us to really understand the future, we look at history. What you're seeing here is a historical view of town's population and growth. The first 100 years, from 1860 to 1960, town was fairly small. And again, 60 to 70 is a huge growth. That growth spurt, I think, is attributed to ISU's quadrupling of student enrollment. And then subsequently, a lot of regional economic changes resulted in really doubling a population from 1970 to 2010. So if the population doubled from 1960 to 1970, from 70 to 2010, it nearly doubled again. What does this mean from a physical perspective? So throughout this presentation, what you'll hear from us is, what does this mean to our built environment, infrastructure, housing, land use, so on and so forth. So this particular population growth really did leave a traceable footprint. From 70s to about 90s, 2000s, it's trying to accommodate this huge growth is a suburban style development. The community nearly doubled from, population-wise doubled from 70 to 2010, but the physical footprint of the community grew 2.5 times during the same time frame. Around 2000 onwards, I think, is where we started to see some denser developments in town of Normal. I'll try not to go into those details just yet, but I do want to give you that frame of reference. So as we are looking at 25 years into the future, it's very important for us to understand what do we look like today from a population perspective, because that's who we are here to serve. This is no surprise, a college town. We have 50% of our population is millennials. We may disagree on exactly when the birth dates are. I've seen 50 different definitions on millennials, but generally I think the younger workforce. The millennials and boomers really kind of defined a lot of things, or boomers really defined a lot of things, and I think now millennials are kind of following the trend of defining what communities look like. And it is very important for us to understand what it is that they like, where they want to live, how they want to move around, where they want to work. These are not just some national trends. They're happening here in our community. We have seen through community outreach that majority of what we have learned through national surveys being reflected here locally in our community outreach process as well. So Normal, once again, looking from a different perspective, from young adults to core employment years and entry workforce ages. There are definitely two anomalies. We have a really high percent of young adults in this community, which we anticipated. But we also saw a significantly lower percentage compared to surrounding communities, population within that core employment years. What does this mean as we move forward into population projections and stuff? This is something that we will be, we need to understand more thoroughly. What we also looked at is where are these groups located? So spatial distribution, everything is about geography. What you're seeing here is imagine reds as higher concentration of certain age group, and blue as lower concentration of the same age group. So the first two maps that you're seeing there is a concentration of families with children under 17. Those are mainly spread around on the outskirts of the town, outskirts if there is one that exists. But young adults, as we imagined, 18 to 24, is located within the core, around the university, around uptown. But what's interesting is concentration of seniors. We've looked at senior exemptions, which is local data, to see where are seniors. Seniors are right around the university. Part of it is the way we have developed our housing here in Normal, but also nationally when we look at trends. Boomers prefer college towns, universities, the cultural offerings there, and they tend to live closer. They're not all fleeing to Florida. They absolutely like to age in place, and this kind of supports that argument that is the same trend that we are seeing here. Race and ethnicity, and again, I'm relatively new to the community, so this is just looking Normal by the numbers. This was somewhat interesting to me that I did not expect, because moving around in the community, it does feel very diverse. But when we just look strictly at the numbers from a race and ethnicity perspective, neither race nor ethnicity is, from that perspective, Normal is not very diverse. However, there are nearly 3,000 foreign-born populations here in the community that kind of adds to that diversity. Income. Something that's important for us to note. Family incomes and household incomes are two different things. Census defines household as persons living in one housing unit, whether they're related or not related. Family is persons living within a housing unit who are actually related to each other. Why do we have to look at these? Particularly with the student influence, this is something that we felt is important for Normal to really understand the economic situation. Family incomes at nearly 93, average family income at nearly 93,000. Normal is one of the affluent communities, definitely in Central Illinois, but compared to state averages. It's no surprise, given that 50% of Normal residents have a bachelor's degree or higher. What's interesting here is it's majority of, a quarter of Normal population falls within that 100 to 150,000. Families fall within that 100 to 150,000 range. absolutely a great news. But what's also important here is to note in situations where we have a relatively wealthy community, there might be social inequality issues that we have to investigate further, particularly for families under 50,000. This is because the way below poverty line is defined sometimes does not take communities' specific wealth into account. And we'll cover a little bit more when we get to stakeholder interviews. So population projections. What we did is, as you can imagine, 25 years into the future, we just cannot draw a single line and say, this is what our population is going to look like. It is an art as much as it's science. And again, I'll try my best to describe this, to explain this, but one of our senior staff members did all the analysis as it relates to projections. What you're seeing there is 3 different lines. The line at the top, the blue line, is a mathematical model that takes historical population into account and says, let's see if history prevails, if things don't change, what would it look like? That's what it would look like. Obviously, that looks a lot higher because historically, particularly in the last 50 years, Normal's lines have been, growth has been significant. So the gray line at the bottom is what the recent study, Be an Advantage, which we'll go over in a little bit more detail here in a minute, projected using data from Woods and Pool for entire McLean County. That's average for the whole county, which comes to about 1% annual growth. So what's that red line in between? That's what we think explains Normal's growth better. Normal's population is based on, predominantly based on university and medical institutions, along with other influences. When we take out the student population that we believe is external to the community and then project rest of the population into the future and then add that back, red line is what it looks like. So the future projection of, is, again, has several assumptions. One, a basic one would be state functioning again. Making sure that things were the same as it was the last 50 years. But we do believe for land use and housing and other calculations going forward from this point, we've used that red line. Why, again, Mitsubishi closure, most people think that we should start projecting, we should probably start seeing population loss. That's really not how it works. When we look at the history tells us that there is a quality of life factor here. There are many attributes that this community has to offer that gives us certain comfort in saying we will be a growing community. That does not negate the fact that we have to work towards it. But taking short-term changes and projecting based on that would, we don't think is the right way of doing this exercise. So with that, in the next 20 years, a potential change of an additional 15,000 plus people, and in 25 years, close to 20,000 people is what we are looking at. So land use. We've taken every single parcel within the community and said, what is it being used as? Keep in mind, land use is not the same as zoning. This is what is the parcel or property being used as. The bar at the down kind of shows the rough percentages, but this slide here explains 37% of all property is being used as residential. This is not uncommon. Residential typically is the largest land use in any community. Again, in college towns like Normal, it's not uncommon to have a higher percentage of institutional land use, and which is our second biggest land use here, 18%. followed by employment, which includes industrial, commercial. And again, employment to some degree is a misnomer because institutional is also employment. This kind of, this is to separate between tax-paying land use and non-tax-paying land use. There is about 13% of undeveloped land, which we'll talk about more. Typically undeveloped or vacant land, based on its zoning, provides opportunities for growth within existing boundaries. Given the dominance of residential, it's absolutely important for us to understand what type of residential do we have. Not all residential is equal. So of that 36.9%, 3/4 is single-family residential. And not all single-family residential is the same. And again, this is not, I'm not trying to hit you with a lot of numbers and data here, but this is something that's very important for us to understand. As we move forward, these details matter. So detached single-family really occupies vast acreages, which is what we have quite a bit of here. Duplexes, which are part of our attached line of single-family, provides the single-family experiences, but not with same amount of acreages. So duplexes, row houses, and condos are all attached single-family. The little bar graph that you're seeing right next to that shows the number of units that we have observed here in Normal for each of these types of buildings. As you can see, row houses provide nearly 16 units per acre versus detached single family, which provides 4 units per acre. That's quite a difference. Why is this important? As we look at trends, when we talk about millennials and how they want rents versus, they prefer to rent more than they prefer to own, more and more research is coming out and on, as they age, how are their preferences changing? Millennials are starting to say, I would like a single family, not the big McMansion, but single family. So single family, all of these types of units provide that single family experience. So we then took a look at vacant property that's zoned residential. And with the help of planning staff, town planning staff, we also looked at annexation agreements and pre-annexation agreements that the town currently has. Town has about 12 annexation and pre-annexation agreements, as well as approved plats that still are not completely built out. Together, they hold a potential of up to 3,600 new units. When we look at the Uptown 2.0 plan that was recently adopted, which came back and identified close to 1,000, I know it's 956, but for us to really realize that vision, we have to take a look at this much more comprehensively. So together, if we start adding the family size, household sizes to that can hold approximately 14,000 people, a big chunk of projected population. As we move forward, this is very important to keep in mind. Like any annexation and pre-annexation agreements, majority of our annexation agreements are on the east side. And when we look at the town, there are some white patches that are still not annexed or built out. Some of these annexation agreements are probably going to come back for renewal or expire here starting in the next 5 to 6 years. What we come up with as part of the comprehensive plan and the core values really will help us determine what next with these. So economic vitality. We looked at obviously, the community is the heels of completing a regional economic strategy called Be an Advantage. I'll try not to bore you too much with those details because many of you are actively involved in that. And the town has adopted the strategy last fall. what we have looked at is, now that we have an adopted economic development strategy, what does that mean from a land use and growth perspective? The strategy identified 5 target industries: information, communications and technology, agribusiness, advanced business services, transportation and logistics, and entrepreneurship. From a land use perspective, the way we look at it, and I believe the study has clearly identified this, entrepreneurship is not a sector in and by itself. For any one of these sectors to thrive and flourish, and for us as a community to grow, entrepreneurship really is the framework. And in 21st century economy, technology and technology-related infrastructure is not optional. When we look at something called agribusiness, transportation, and logistics, technology is not something that comes to mind, but it is essential for every single industry that we are looking at. Obviously, in economic target sectors presented by our Economic Development Council would probably be different. What we've looked at is strictly from land use, zoning, and infrastructure lens. So the next couple of slides, I will address how planning can influence or planning needs of some of these industry sectors. So entrepreneurship, again, in implementation of Be an Advantage, one of the key things that they identified is a structure of how can we implement Be an Advantage. We have a leadership council of which Mayor Coos is part of, and then followed by various task forces. I know Mr. McBride is leading one of the task forces. The work of all of these task forces is essential and key for Be an Advantage to move forward. There is a dedicated task force on entrepreneurship that's looking at a whole host of things that we need to do as a community to move that forward. But we've looked at what other successful startup communities have done to really call themselves as startup communities. And this is a quick graphic that shows, again, from APA, that talks about the critical elements from a land use and planning perspective on planning for startup communities. Urban placemaking, once again, sitting in Uptown, I feel blessed to be able to point to all your hard work on what urban placemaking is. That really is absolutely essential. Anywhere America is not going to work anymore. And this is where I think we absolutely need to have our future goggles and say, okay, how can this keep moving on? How can Uptown become the nuclei for entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurs are in every sector. I know typically technology is the sector that immediately comes to mind when we talk about entrepreneurship, but they are across all fields, across all target sectors, come in various sizes and shapes. And that is something, when we look at, for an immediate short-term goal, it's easy for us to say, okay, let's increase the number of startups. Great. Sole proprietors, 2 to 5 employees, but it goes beyond that. Entrepreneurships and small businesses need support much more beyond those initial startup stages. That's where our future-oriented thinking and how can we keep those new businesses right here in our community. Obviously, if I'm an entrepreneur, I can build a successful business. My first goal would be, how can I sell this to Google or Intel or somebody and move and find my next venture? That means our headquarters, we're, headquarters of State Farm, which started out as an entrepreneurial firm. How can we keep these startups and entrepreneurs right here in our community as they grow is very important for us to think. Collaborative action, that's something that the EDC's task force is set up to hopefully bring all these actors together. But if there is one thing I absolutely would like to make a case for today, it is when we look at economic incentive packages, we talk about TIF district, we talk about sales tax rebates. What we need to start talking about is how can the place be part of this economic incentive. So as the discussions that we had today as part of Hole in the Ground, I think the incentive that people would expect or are expecting for 21st century economy, along with all these other things, is place. So how can we start selling ourselves along with the place as an economic incentive package? And what's very interesting is that International Economic Development Council, who typically have promoted tools like enterprise zones and big industry attracting, now are starting to talk about how can communities start to attract and retain small businesses. So I'm going to go over some of the industry needs really briefly, because the analysis that we've done is trying to quickly understand of these target sectors, what is it that we need to be aware of, because from a planning perspective, we want to be prepared. We don't want to have stumbling blocks as the industries move in to the community. So some sectors absolutely thrive in mixed-use urban environments. When you look at ICT, and the subsectors that are identified for our community, it's software developers, LAN, and back office and shared services and things like that. Most of those, if you look at where they're thriving, those are all absolutely in mixed-use urban environments, such as Uptown Normal. Others absolutely need vast acreages and industrial neighbors and nobody but industrial neighbors. Transportation and logistics and food processing are examples of that. So food processing it's a continuum. It's not just one industry. It's anything from value-added agriculture all the way to Nestle's and beer nuts. Before moving here into this community, I worked for City of Decatur, as most of you might have known. As soon as I moved there, the first time I smelled ADM, people said, "That smell of money, get used to it." That's one way of looking at it, I guess. Again, no complaints, but I think quality of place is absolutely important, and that's what this community had for so long. And as we start bringing in, and as we move geared towards bringing new economy, those are things we absolutely need to keep in mind. How does this change the quality of place? From transportation and logistics perspective, they need vast acreages. We need to look at, do we have a place to accommodate these industries? And if yes, how can we make sure that this fits in with our long-range goals? Other industries really have an ability to create that unique identity for a community. I have local food here as an example. And this is where, once again, we need our future goggles, because food is something that communities, municipalities particularly, have not been involved in the past. But moving forward, many communities are getting more involved in this, because this is where millennials are saying, we care about where our food is coming from. We care about what we need to know who is producing our food. And workplaces are saying, how can I reduce my healthcare costs? How can I continue to build a workforce that's healthy? And communities are building an entire economic development strategy around local food. So from an infrastructure perspective, as I mentioned earlier, and I cannot underscore this enough, technology is absolutely critical. We have an amazing middle mile here. We have Serban, we have 2 other private companies who are competing for our business here, but do we have that last mile? And I don't know the answer to this, and I think we need to actually look at this much more regionally to see how far is our last mile going? Because when we talk about entrepreneurship, some of these start in people's garages and basements. How are we equipped to be able to foster this? Some sectors, as I pointed out, need multimodal access. And I know we use multimodal for several things. In this particular instance, when we are looking at transportation and logistics business, the new wave of this is having the ability to transport by road, by rail, by air. And sites that are in close proximity and have multimodal access is a huge advantage. And many of these, as you can imagine, they overlap quite a bit. Agribusiness and transportation and logistics are overlap quite a bit. Maintenance of our transportation infrastructure, both urban and rural, is absolutely critical for these industries. Yet others, like food processing, they use a lot of water and they discharge a lot of water. So we as a community need to make sure that we have excess capacity, not just for the next 5 years or for 10 years. Do we have excess capacity to bring this industry? Cost absolutely matters when we are looking at food processing and some of these industries who use these services quite a bit. So after looking at the regional economy, we looked at the town's economy. As we mentioned, as part of population projections, the reason why town's population was projected at a higher rate than what would be an advantage generally projected for the entire McLean County is because of the stable employment base. Once again, this is not assuming that things are going to be hunky-dory, but assuming that the economic development strategies are going to start showing some results. Financial trends and conditions report. I really have to thank your finance department. They have done a phenomenal job. Andrew Hune has been very helpful in trying to show us through these fantastic information for the last 10 plus years. As a numbers person, when I looked at land use, I automatically assumed with nearly 27% of all properties being tax exempt, I anticipated to see a higher property tax rate. I was so shocked and surprised to see a lower tax rate, municipal tax rate in Normal compared to several other central Illinois communities. And that's absolutely noteworthy and speaks to the town's ability to manage that. And the financial trends and conditions report ranks many areas of growth, like community growth, revenue, expenditures, and so on and so forth, and identified many as positive with caution. Majority of the caution was based on the regional economic uncertainty, which again is being addressed regionally, and town is actively participating in that process. What we found out is the town's redevelopment activities, particularly in Uptown and along Main Street, really does position the town well to accommodate the 21st century economy, which demands much more mixed-use urban environments. So from a commercial development perspective, there are many opportunities for growth. What you're seeing here on this map, I apologize for the lack of readability of this map, but what we're seeing here is these yellow lines here. That's the interstate, and this here is Veterans Parkway, and this is the Main Street corridor right here. There are many opportunities for development and redevelopment within the town's corporate limits. Dark blue is sites that are underutilized and have potential for redevelopment. Gray is vacant lots that are zoned for commercial, industrial, or office uses. And blue is vacant lots under institutional ownership. Yeah, the town does not have direct influence on many of these, but these are opportunities for growth and redevelopment within the town. What we've also shown is TIF districts and enterprise districts within the town. And clearly there are 5 areas that stand out that have incredible potential. Mitsubishi, right now there is a task force dedicated to finding a new owner for that area. But as we are looking 25 years into the future, we want to make sure that we also have a plan B. But 2 is Uptown, that is much more, with both Uptown 1.0 and 2.0, is already geared towards mixed-use urban redevelopment that we are talking about for 21st century future economy. And we think that would be a fantastic place as we move forward. Number 3 that you're seeing there is From a transportation and logistics perspective, there is I-39 corridor, regional logistics, a big push towards making I-39 a regional logistics corridor. There are currently sites in that area that are being promoted for those purposes. What we want to do from a comprehensive planning perspective is it might look like that would be an area for transportation and logistics. We just want to make sure that we analyze that area further to see how that's conflicting with, say, agricultural farmland preservation goals or NICOD businesses that are in that area. And most importantly, that's also a community gateway. So we want to make sure that we look at that much more comprehensively. 4 and 5, 4 is One Normal Plaza. There has been many discussions about One Normal Plaza for quite some time. There is a TIF district, and it's located right next to industrial area. We do feel like there is opportunity in those areas to investigate more on certain types of target sectors, like local food, for example, that can benefit from placemaking, but also has some industrial uses. Given their proximity to each other and existing tools like TIF districts and enterprise zones, we want to take a look at that area more closely for that. Town's infrastructure, once again, in a great condition. Town has ongoing funding for infrastructure and maintenance factored in. Majority of the new systems planning is geared more towards maintenance and upgrades rather than building new. For example, the new fire plan and the ongoing sewer plan, both of which are considering how can we maintain our existing, within the existing corporate boundaries. Some of the regional issues we want to bring to your attention is Bloomington Normal Water Reclamation District, which provides the sanitary sewer services for both Bloomington and Normal and some of the other areas, surrounding areas. They are anticipating a West plant deconstruction and reconstruction in the next 5 to 15 years, which is short term, and a preliminary estimate at about $150 million. Those are huge numbers. We do think that we need to make sure that we understand all the details. They're not quite at that point where they are applying for permits and stuff, so we are going to work with them closely to really understand how that's going to influence our overall economic development aspects, because one of the things I will tell you is they just had one new plant on the Randolph plant that added quite a bit to our tap-on fees. And we've heard about that from the home builders as soon as we started talking to them. So what does this new plant do? We need to keep an eye on that. Air quality, EPA has revised their new ozone standards. They've lowered it from 75 parts per billion to 70 in 2014. The way they are going to establish non-attainment zones is by taking 3-year averages. The very first one between 2012 and 2014, our numbers were at 71, which would technically put us at non-attainment. Fortunately, the next 3-year average, 2013 to 15, took us down to 65 parts per billion. The third one that they're getting ready to do would be 14 through 16, and mid-2017, they will start establishing non-attainment zones. So we are going to hope and pray for a cool summer so that we don't want that non-attainment zone. That is going to add quite a bit of regulatory red tape to bringing in new industry. We also, this is probably not news to most of you, our landfill is getting ready to close. Ecology Action Center is in the process of working with, obviously, Town of Normal, City of Bloomington, and the county, and many other players in the process of establishing a 20-year solid waste plan. to address those issues. From a health perspective, in this chapter, we are looking at physical health, mental health, and environmental health. However, I chose just to bring in one aspect of this. So if I want you to remember one number from this presentation on health, that would be the number on obesity and overweight. So again, this chart, I don't know how readable this is. The line on the blue line there is McLean County obesity numbers compared to red, which is Illinois, and green, which is United States. As a county, we have been beating the state and national averages for the last 10 years on obesity numbers. And when we combine that with overweight, we are close to 65% of all adults in McLean County being overweight or obese. I'm going to pause for a second for that to sink in, because for me, as a planner, I'm not a health professional. And when I look at those numbers, those are huge. And that's 2/3 of our adult population in that statistic. Obesity was linked to 20+ chronic diseases. I know our friends at health department and hospitals are really trying to combat this epidemic. From a land use perspective, I think it's very important for us to look at how the built environment is having an impact on this. This year, a health department is working collaboratively with the 2 hospitals to create a regional health plan. So as part of the comprehensive plan, we'll be working closely with them. But the major factors that contribute to obesity is physical activity and food. I couldn't help but ask some of our friends at health department to say, why is McLean County so high? What is it that we are doing or not doing? And obviously, health data somehow is not so specific to each community for them to give me any specific answers. So they gave some understanding of what they think is influencing. There are a few factors that explain this. One is access to fresh food and food deserts and things like that. But we just went through a set of slides that showed how rich we are. So yes, it does impact that to some degree, but shouldn't really, for a county this size, that really didn't do it for me. So I kept asking, what else? And they said, did you know that we have the highest number of restaurants per capita? And we are a community that loves to eat out. That could be, and USDA did publish a statistic that's called Food Environment Index, and we have 0.75 fast food joints per every 1,000 people. And typical average for a county our size is 0.58. So there are some factors going in. From an economic development perspective, it's great. We are trending, in a way that's going to bring in some revenue, but we need to kind of start to look at this a little bit more comprehensively to see how we can combat obesity and overweight. So with that, I'm going to switch gears and go to community outreach. So that's all data and analysis. From a community outreach perspective, we are so happy to report that we have a fantastic community who loves to engage and give us what they think. As you know, we really put in a lot of effort to reach out to as many different groups of residents as we possibly can to know what it is that they want for future of normal. And what this graph is showing you is number of responses. I think it's saying 1717, but it's really 1718. Every survey counts. Owners and renters, we ended up at 70% and 30%. Ideally, we would have loved to see how it's reflected in the community, which is much more close to 60-40. But we are happy with these because we've learned early on that it's very hard to reach renters, and we are very happy to have reached that percentage of rental. And rest everything else kind of is reflective of the community's overall demographic profile, I guess. So what we've learned, summing up all of what community told us about what they liked in Normal is almost not doing justice. But since we had to do it, definitely we had to create a little graphic to show how much the community loved Uptown. We've heard nearly 50% of all members, and this is the first two questions are open-ended. This was based on what they chose to tell us, not what we've asked them. And Uptown is absolutely a hit. I know, some of you have envisioned this well before it became Uptown that we are all experiencing today, but this is definitely a success. What else do people love about Normal? We've heard affordability, we've heard clean and safe, colleges and universities, a lot of family-friendly activities, shopping and dining, arts, culture, and entertainment. I can go down the list, but what's really refreshing is people being proactive and saying, we have a progressive leadership, we really like the direction in which the town is going, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm really happy to report that back here, because this is the way we've distributed the surveys. We've tried to reach as many different groups of people as we possibly can. And this is responses from the open-ended questions. Redevelopment activities, walkability and bikeability within Normal, and environmental stewardship here. Overall, people think that Normal really balances the small town feel with all the large city amenities that we have here. And many of them, when they say Normal, they are also referring to Bloomington Normal, the larger community here, because most people don't see the division line as division line. So improvements, want more. Uptown redevelopment, more specifically. Hole in the ground, we've heard quite a bit about that. Uptown 2.0, they would love to see Uptown 2.0 developed. Expanded bike and ped infrastructure with very specific recommendation of which intersection is, some people really kind of took it to, gave us quite a bit of recommendations, which we've mapped carefully, and we are going to use those as we move into the next stages of this plan. Expanded transit hours, we've heard quite a bit about that, evening hours and weekends. Curbside recycling for apartments. Concerns that were listed, I have to say few and far in between, but there were few people who expressed concern about Mitsubishi closure and some of the State Farm relocation. People also expressed concern about taxes, and I have to stress this because the percentage of comments that talked about this are overall 8.2% of the 1,700 plus. Some concerns that kind of were conflicting is, Uptown, people wanted more redevelopment, and some people thought, too much attention is being paid just to Uptown. Police, students felt like they were targeted, and others thought that students should be, they need to be more cracked down. Housing, affordability issues near the university, people said, living anywhere close by the university, particularly rental, is not very affordable. Some neighbors, particularly from the historic neighborhoods, were concerned about housing encroachment into residential neighborhoods, student housing encroachment into residential neighborhoods. This slide is designed to be completely unreadable. Unfortunately, this is, if you remember the questions from the survey, this is question 5, which asked, which of the following factors did you consider when choosing the neighborhood in which you live? The reason for this question is we wanted some additional guidance from people who are living here in Normal today to gauge what factors are really driving this. I'll try to, what we've done with the responses is we've grouped them into 3 big groups, 3 major groups. Group 1 is where 75% of the total respondents either felt those factors were important or very important. Group 2 is anywhere between 50 to 74% felt they were important or very important. Group 3 is factors where over 50% of them felt they were not important. So within Group 1 factors, some of those are things that we have imagined would come up. Cleanliness and safety, we all want to live in a clean and safe community. Affordability of housing, neighborhoods with features such as sidewalks that encourage walking. To be honest with you, I am slightly surprised as high as it was ranked. Parks and recreational opportunities, quality public schools, proximity to work that really made it to the top of the list. Again, showing how some of the national trends is not just trends someplace else, that people here care about these things. Neighborhoods with attractive public spaces that foster interaction among neighbors. Those were all rated fairly high by majority of the respondents. So factors within Group 2, walking distance to destinations such as universities, restaurants, and public facilities. Neighborhood with connections to Constitution Trail. Ability to live in my house as I get older, aging in place. Neighborhoods with a mix of ages and incomes. Schools within walking distance. Neighborhood with mix of racial and ethnic diversity. And public transportation access and frequency. These factors, we've asked many demographic questions, their age, their race, their income, and all these other factors. What seemed to be determinative within these is age and income. Some factors were rated highly by certain age groups, like, say, walking distance to destinations such as universities, restaurants, and public facilities. 18 to 24-year-olds rated that the highest. I believe, to be more precise, it's close to 84% of them rated that as a very high factor. Others didn't seem to rate that as high. Ability to live in my house as I get older started to get ranked higher as from about 44 and above. And once we publish the report, you'll be able to see how it gradually progressed from 45 to 65. That's where people are thinking about that. So the factors within these and how much importance we're going to place on these depends on our core values. As we move forward, how inclusive do we want to be as a community? What is it that we want to be in 2014? Group 3, which is factors such as neighborhoods with mix of housing types, single-family townhomes, apartments, so on and so forth. It's interesting that this ranked low and affordability of housing ranked really high. To me, this suggests that we absolutely have some education to do in the community on how do we achieve affordability. And again, the definition of affordability might be different for different people in different income brackets. Last but not the least, historic homes in historic neighborhoods was ranked as not important by over 50%. This does not mean that we need to start demolishing all the historic homes. What it really means is our inventory here in Normal is low, so the number of people who are thinking about these is not as high as some of these other factors. Future priorities, again, this is a very generic question to see, based on existing studies, existing plans, and existing work that's already been done here in Normal, we asked the respondents to help us prioritize these. Unfortunately, they were just as conflicted as we were because over 80% thought all of these are either important or very important. So moving forward, we know that these are some of the factors that we absolutely have to consider. And some of these are very much connected to each other, like technology and stable economy, as we've learned that we cannot look at those as two different factors. They're really essential and dependent on each other. So stakeholder groups, we talked to over 40 different groups within Town of Normal, targeting specifically those that residents that we have not heard from, and agencies who can bring their voice to the table, and also apartment managers who have, particularly in Normal, there is quite a bit of rental here in Normal, so we wanted to learn more from apartment managers. We also talked to utilities as well as development community. One thing that I would like to stress here is, just like the broader community surveys, 40 different groups all had significantly positive comments about town of Normal, town's leadership, town's direction in general. Uptown is very well received by all these groups. So some key issues raised, I'll try to make these quick. Apartment managers, student apartment managers overall are extremely impressed with what's going on here in Town of Normal. They're mostly content. They think that it's helping them positively to recruit students here. We also talked to apartment managers who accept Section 8 vouchers. Generally speaking, they all said it's a very safe town, and they while they see some incidences within their individual apartments, that they keep in touch with police directly about those. They did point out the increase in number of low-income families since recession, and they said these are not typically what people consider those people, where it is somebody else. What they wanted us to know, and us as a community to know, is those people are us. It is our teachers, our nurses, our educators. It's what people you don't think about as needing help. And this is where I think it's important for us to look at this housing, not just for Town of Normal or City of Bloomington, but much more regionally, to see what it is that we need or have gaps. And as presented here before, McLean County Regional Planning Commission is committed to doing a regional housing study, because we absolutely realize that we cannot address this issue doing one for Town of Normal and one for City of Bloomington. Transit was another issue that was raised. Majority of that is many of their clientele have jobs that don't fit the traditional jobs. And having access to transit during off hours or weekends has been challenging. I'm really happy to see where Connect is going with this. I'm slightly surprised to know that there are not many landlords within Town of Normal that accept Section 8 vouchers, and people who do accept Section 8 vouchers wanted education about how other apartment managers can start accepting these. Development community, this is very interesting for me, because we've just wrapped up Bloomington Plan, and we've talked to many of the realtors and developers and engineers not too long ago, about 2 years ago. Even from then to now, things have changed slightly. They're convinced that large homes are a thing of the past. They definitely prefer denser developments that kind of reduce the development costs overall. But overall, they are concerned about the dampened local economy and the regional and state economy. They did point out, particularly Home Builders Association pointed out how a number of home builders are going out of business because of this dampened economy. Development costs for new construction, they did point out as a concern. Particularly tap-on fees, which we then followed up with Benward to ask more questions. The new development on the east side triggered construction of a new sewer plant. So the payback model for that is to associate that with new construction. And obviously, that has increased some of the tap-on fees. Utilities, we talked to electric utilities, gas utilities, infrastructure, technology infrastructure like Suburban. Sprawl is universally a concern. Some of those utilities are even refusing to put down telecommunications infrastructure in new subdivisions. NICOR is very particular about not just wanting to lay down infrastructure in anticipation of growth. So sprawl is not what they prefer. They definitely prefer denser urban developments. Something that was brought to our attention is a crowded right-of-way easements. As more and more utilities are trying to find space, as new technology infrastructure is coming in, I think we have more demand for the same space, which we need to look at more, because those are not controlled by any local ordinances. Social service agencies, once again pointed out lack of affordable housing. This is an issue I think we need to absolutely look at regionally, because many of their clientele come from West Bloomington. So there is a general perception that Normal is more expensive. But I think from a regional perspective, when we have, having worked on Bloomington plan, we do know that there is some housing within Bloomington, west side of Bloomington, that's probably even below standard. And from an affordability perspective, we absolutely need to look at a broader picture to see what that means. Housing with supportive services for persons with special needs. As of date, there is a gap in that. Transportation and mobility, there were many gaps identified, such as door-through-door, particularly for seniors and persons with special needs. Recreational needs for, again, for people on autistic spectrum was also pointed out. Senior issues, I think broadly, the agencies serving seniors wanted us to know that not all senior issues are the same, just like not all demographic issues are the same. Seniors come from various backgrounds with varying abilities to pay for various services. So generally, education on senior issues was a big challenge for them to really identify senior needs. And municipal support for seniors to stay in their homes longer, such as extension of their homes for their families and things like that. Universal design and accessibility. This cuts across not just senior issues, but many, many issues. So moving forward, what next? We need to absolutely ask some questions like growth priorities. Who do we want to attract? How do we retain them here? What type of housing or what type of mobility services do we need here? And where and how do we grow sustainably? Bean Advantage has many target sectors. What is it that suits Normal? Inclusion and diversity, should the town play a role? If yes, to what extent and how? Infrastructure is very much connected to our economic stability, so how do we prioritize these locally and regionally? So next steps, we are going to publish, hopefully not too thick of a document next month. And that will be followed by the next and very important process. The town has a solid history of visioning for the community, and this time around we are integrating that with the comprehensive plan. So we are going to look at the vision committee to be appointed by the mayor to help us come up with some core values and vision for the quality of place that Normal should be by 2040. And the input for that group would be existing conditions and community outreach. Hopefully, they'll be meeting for the next 6 months, April through September of 2016, and maybe come up with some recommendations of core values that should be reflected in all elements of planning as we move forward. And then we'll have working groups who will then further prioritize those and come up with action items to achieve those. We hope to wrap up this process again by next summer or early fall. With that, I apologize for this information overload, and I'll take questions now.
Any questions? That was very comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. McCarthy?
Just a couple. I got a ton, but I'll just ask you a couple.
Okay.
tonight. I need these apparently to read them. In the housing capacity, I assume you made some assumptions about detached, the various duplex, condo things, and you gave us a 3,600 units, 14,000. Those were single-family detached. What was
So-
your assumption of the density of?
Do those, so we want to make sure that we take those into consideration.
So those numbers could vary substantially based on what we do from a zoning and density
Absolutely.
perspective in our planning?
So
Okay.
based on the core values that we establish at the end of this process, when annexation agreements comes back here for a renewal, that's the time to kind of start applying those core values and say, does this fit, does this
Yeah.
not fit?
Perfect. So because I have a professional interest and a community interest, so help me understand on a really 10,000-foot view. No, I'm not asking any kind of depth here, but you underline the, if we take one number away from the health stats, is the obesity.
Yes.
So kind of give us a high level of how regional planning recommendations are going to address overweight and obesity health issues here.
Absolutely. So what we are going to definitely look at is, in the past, when the county is required, the county health department is required to create what they call an I-plan every 5 years. In the past, there has never been a built environment aspect to that. Even when there was a built environment aspect to it, it was very generic to say, look at the built environment to see how this can be addressed. Health absolutely needs to be tied in with all systems. And that, whether it is walkability, bikeability, crime and safety numbers, and kids being able to walk to school even if they live right next door, need to see the perception of how many actual walkers are within a walking distance of a school and how many are actually walking to the school. Information on grocery stores. We have exuberant number of grocery stores in this community. All of those are concentrated along Veterans Parkway where nobody can walk to. We can go on and on about number of issues that need to be addressed from a safe routes to school perspective, from a overall, when we look at mixed-use urban environments, those are all, they promote physical activity. And how can we start linking these and start looking at built environment through health lens?
So physical access.
Physical access is one aspect, and the second aspect definitely would be food. And this is where, in the past, local governments probably have limited involvement in food. There are tons of examples in our surrounding communities. For example, Michigan. I know Michigan probably is not the greatest example, but since they're our neighbor, they've gone through quite a bit of transformation, economic stress, and a whole bunch of other things. They had to really reimagine what it is that they want to be. And they took local food as an aspect of economic development. That cuts across so many aspects within the community of what our workforce wants, what our employers want, how can they cut their healthcare costs. Local food is also local purchasing, which is a great economic tool for our community. All of these need to be linked together and then see how those influence our health numbers.
So something like the Green Top Grocery that's
That
trying to
is,
get going.
yeah, that is a fantastic example. But, you know, I'm sure you probably know that local food has many aspects, from production to processing to business development. Again, from an entrepreneurial perspective, what local food entrepreneurs would need is slightly different than what tech entrepreneurs would need, even though they have many of the common aspects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a presentation on the sanitary sewer master planning process by Wayne Aldrich.
Joining Wayne, too, is Scott DeSplinter with consulting firm of Crawford, Murphy and Tilley, who we've brought on board to help with this process. Scott's been very valuable.
Thanks. Yeah, we have the fun and exciting topic of sanitary sewers tonight. Great. Hope you enjoy it. Yeah, we've been really formally involved in a sanitary sewer master plan since about November, so a fairly aggressive schedule for a study like this. And we thought it was a good time to, as the council will have to consider decisions, you know, in the future based, you know, on knowledge of sanitary sewer systems, we thought it was a good time to review our sanitary sewer system with you, discuss some challenges that we have with it and some potential solutions, and then kind of just review the sanitary sewer master planning process with you. With me is Scott DeSplinter. Scott's with Crawford, Murphy and Tilley. That is one of the firms that we select as one of our continuing services firms to help us out with projects. CMT has a lot of experience with sanitary sewers and sanitary sewer master planning, currently involved with Springfield Sanitary Sewer District as well as the Peoria Sanitary Sewer District. So I'll have Scott just get into our presentation, and then we'll see if there's questions afterwards.
Thanks, Wayne. I figured we'd start off looking at just a typical gravity sewer system so we can review the different components and assets as a quick overview before we dig into the specifics. And it all starts with your business or your residence, and the water's collected inside and drained to the collection system through private sewer service laterals. These are typically 4 to 6 inches clay or PVC pipes, which drain to the collector sewers, which are located in either the front right-of-way or a rear yard easement. And their larger pipes are usually 8 inches up to 16 inches in diameter and constructed of either clay or PVC plastic pipes. Ultimately, they drain down to trunk sewers, which are larger sewers. For your system, they range in size from anywhere from 18-inch all the way up to 60-inch diameter. They're typically constructed of either brick for the older ones, concrete for some newer ages, but new sewer construction of this size would typically be more plastic, PVC, or fiberglass pipes. And ultimately, the trunk sewers drain to a regional trunk sewer line and then to the wastewater treatment plant. Both the regional trunk sewer line and the wastewater treatment plant for your system are owned and operated by the Bloomington Normal Water Reclamation District. Another component of the gravity system is the manholes. They're typically the metal castings that you see in the roadway that provide access to an underground structure that gives the sewer department and contractors access to the actual sewer pipes underground for inspection, cleaning, and rehabilitation methods. If a system can't be drained by gravity, then you have to install a pump station. And the pump stations collect all the flow from the developed area by gravity and pump it through a forced main to another portion in the gravity system that can flow by gravity. Forced mains are typical construction are either PVC pipe or ductile iron pipe. And pump stations comprise of 5 major areas or components. These photos here are of your Ironwood pump station. And the first component we're going to talk about is the wet well, which is this upper left photo. And it's a concrete structure underground that collects all the sewage that comes from the residents in the developed area. And for the majority of your pump stations, all but one, you have submersible pumps, which are actually housed within the wet well at the bottom and pump the flow out from the bottom of the wet well. The bottom left is the control building. It houses all the electrical gear and controls for the pump stations in a controlled environment and away from the elements so that they'll have a longer life. The bottom right are the valves and discharge piping from those pumps. They're critical in that they allow you to isolate a pump if it's broken, and they also prevent the flow from coming back into the wet well after it's been pumped out. And the upper right is probably one of the most important components of your pump stations, which is the emergency backup equipment. This is actually the emergency backup pump for Ironwood Pump Station, which is there in case you have a mechanical failure of a pump, but also adds added capacity to this station. Not pictured, but also present at the majority of your stations are backup generators for in case of power loss. So now that we've kind of gone through what basically comprises a collection sanitary sewer system, the question is how big is yours? So you have 186 miles of sewer. Of that 186 miles, 97% of it's clay, and 86% of it is 16-inch diameter and less. So relatively smaller pipes of the majority clay construction. You have 3,742 manholes, 7 pump stations, and 11 miles of force main. Your system was comprised wholly of a gravity system up until about 1987, when development north of town and east of town necessitated the need for pump stations to serve those areas. We've developed a planning level asset value of your system of $182 million. And this will come into play later on in the planning process when we assess future funding needs and renewal needs of the system.
I did want to point out the sewer shown in the bottom right is the Franklin Avenue sanitary sewer. It's a brick sewer, so that's an actual sewer in Normal. It's probably the oldest trunk sewer in Normal. It's probably over 100 years old, but look at its condition. We've got some other pictures of it that aren't as good, but, you know, it just shows kind of the, you know, craftsmanship and how that's held up over time.
They don't make them like that anymore, do they, man?
So a system of this size and magnitude has challenges. So what are the main challenges that are facing your system moving forward? Overall system age. Typical service lives for sewers and structures, concrete, manholes underground, are anywhere from 80 to 100 years, depending on the conditions they experience. Mechanical, electrical components in your pump station have a service life more in the 15 to 20 year range. So overall, we looked at the average sewer age of your system, and it come out to be about 40 years, which is right in the middle, which is good, but you also have sewer that is 75 plus years old that's gaining on their service life or even has exceeded its service life. Now, just because it's exceeded its service life doesn't mean it needs to be replaced tomorrow. That's where further investigation, inspections come in to determine how much or what the degree of risk of failure is on those. And we'll cover some photos later that'll kind of illustrate that. Another system challenge is just construction materials as a whole. Brick sewers were really well built. The craftsmanship was good, and they've lasted this long, some 100 years or better. But the problem is they're in a very corrosive environment. With the sewer and sewer gases within these pipes, the mortar is becoming soft, and the loading conditions above them are starting to cause some signs of fatigue and failure. In the upper left is a photo of the Ironwood, or actually Franklin. The Franklin brick sewer, and you can see the crack in the crown in this section that's starting to open up that begins to raise concerns. To the right are 2 photos of clay pipe. The one on the far right is good clay pipe. You have a lot of that in your system in the newer parts of town. But you also have some that have started to see deterioration due to root infiltration, which we'll cover later, and then also loss of bedding or loading conditions that have caused that pipe to crack and ultimately will cause a collapse. In the lower right is a brick manhole. That's actually one in University Street. It's in pretty good condition, but you've got to keep an eye on these and keep inspecting them to determine when the mortar will get soft and look to renew or rehab these as you go forward. In the lower left is a failure of a ductile iron force main. These can fail from the inside out with the corrosive gases from the sewage inside eating away. They do line these with cement linings to try to lengthen that time that would occur, but in your condition, I think you're seeing a lot of outside-in corrosion. Current standards would have ductile iron wrapped in a polyethylene wrap as it put in, like a big black trash bag, for lack of better terminology, that would protect this from the corrosive soils. Unfortunately, some of your sewer force mains were put in, such as ironwood, prior to this requirement within the industry.
As you recall, that picture is not Ironwood force main, but we have had failures like that up on the Ironwood force main.
A system challenge that I alluded to is root intrusion. This can be caused by several things, and it's not strictly clay pipes that see it. Brick sewers are very susceptible to it too. And the joints on clay pipes in the mortar and the brick sewers tend to fail over time, and the roots make their way in. And when they do, they can cause blockages, but they also cause stress on the pipe that can cause cracking and break the pipe overall and cause a collapse. The last system challenge that we're going to talk about is inflow and infiltration, which we call I&I. The reason this is so important is it's extra water, rainwater, stormwater that's getting into your sanitary sewer system that takes up all the capacity within it and can cause a backup or a basement flooding or even a surface discharge. Connections really fall into two sources. The private side connections can be roof drains that are tied directly in, foundation tiles or sump pumps, all three which are illegal in your current code and the state plumbing code and shouldn't be allowed. You could also get broken pipes or laterals with roots intrusion into it that can cause additional sources of groundwater getting into your system. On the public side, you can have a direct connection from a storm sewer. Your system is considered a separate system, but that doesn't mean that there couldn't be a connection out there that you're not aware of that has happened over the years. And through your inspection processes and your maintenance, you will try to identify those and remove them. You also have cracks in your system, as some of the photos entail, and then the deterioration of the manholes allow in a lot of groundwater that contribute to I&I. So now that we know what the system entails and what challenges it's facing, we figured we would cover how much and what staff you have covering this. And you have 12 dedicated staff members in the sewer maintenance division. They handle pump station maintenance, sanitary sewer repairs, sewer cleaning and inspections, Julie locates, and dye testing of new construction. They also cover all of these things for the storm sewer side, along with the sanitary. And to do this, they utilize a couple key pieces of equipment. The first would be the sewer inspection truck. This is a Q's truck that's equipped with a remote camera that they can insert into the actual sewer pipes and take pictures and videos of the defects, the plugs, the root intrusion, so that they know where to clean and maintain the system. Last year, they used this truck to inspect over 6.7 miles of sewer. A second piece of equipment, that you actually have two of these, are Vactor trucks. A Vactor truck is usually paired with your TV inspection truck to clean and maintenance anything that they find. And then your second truck is usually out cleaning a portion of the system or performing excavations. You can actually dig with these around tight utilities without worrying about damage to them. In 2015, they cleaned over 27 miles of sewer. They have a number of other miscellaneous equipment, including bypass pumps, 2 of them, and they use these for 182 emergency calls in 2015 and 132 repairs made in 2015. In the last piece of equipment that we're going to cover is actually hardware and software, which is the Geographic Information System. And this is becoming critical to the operation of the Sewer Maintenance Division because it houses all of the existing data for the collection system. And it is also going to house all the inspection data, the maintenance history, and complaint history for the sewers throughout the town so that they can better track and better target where they're spending their time. And we mention all of this so that we understand that they're doing a lot with what they have already, but as you see, your assets are getting up there in age. They're getting to the tipping point where you've got 40 years average age that you look to try to, the industry says you should try to renew or rehab 1% of your facility a year. So if you want to maintain a 40 to 50 year average age, you need to be looking at renewing and replacing 1% of your system a year to try to keep up with that service life as you move forward. And your pump stations have an average age of 15 years, and their service life is in the 15 to 20 years. And I think you've already seen an increase of mechanical and electrical replacements in those. So what is the need for a sanitary sewer master plan? And the goal is really to identify and perform maintenance and rehabilitation before they become emergency repairs. Go from being reactive on the left where the sinkhole's already shown up, you've already had the backup, you're already having a disruption to your customers, and it's a lot more expensive to replace and repair your asset there versus proactive on the right, which is a photo of a lining operation for a sanitary sewer. And we'll dig in just a little bit later in the presentation on different options for rehabilitating your assets. Another reason is to develop a complete understanding of the sewer system. This is necessary so that you can target these efforts and prioritize your rehabilitation. If you don't know all your assets out there and haven't seen them or inspected them recently, you have no idea what's lurking in the shadows for you as you go forward. You have pipes out there that are probably 50 years old that you've not seen inside because they're either too big for your inspection equipment or they haven't posed a problem yet and you're focused on being reactive to your complaint calls and stuff going forward. So what the sanitary sewer master plan is to help prioritize areas and get you to closer to the goal of being proactive versus reactive. There will be a process where you're still going to have to react to things, but as you get better and farther along in the plan, you'll get closer to being proactive and see less emergency repairs and less overflows. So different types of rehab and repair alternatives. The most popular out there and that you're currently doing and have just completed on the airport road is sewer lining. So on the upper left and upper right are pictures of sewers that have failed. The upper left has collapses in the side of the pipes that can be cleaned out through the jetter, or roots in the upper right that could be root cut and cleaned out and then lined, and the finished product is in the center. And the way they do this is they have a felt or fiberglass bag that they pull into the sanitary sewer that has a resin in it that is cured. So the bag is inflated with pressure against the side of the existing pipe and cured either with pressure and heat or pressure and light. And once it's cured, it's a plastic pipe or fiberglass pipe inside your existing sewer that has no joints from the manhole to the following manhole. And they actually have the robotic camera has cutters on it that drive down and reestablish by cutting in the service lines so that the service connections are cut with a no-dig option. This is very cost-effective way of rehabbing versus a point repair, which is shown in the lower left-hand corner, where you actually have to dig and fight the existing utilities and the number of utilities that you have now in your right-of-way with the increased telecoms and things like that. Another alternative that we have on the slide is pipe bursting or reaming, and this is completed by pulling a pipe in the existing pipe. As you do that, a reaming head advances ahead of the new pipe and bursts and pushes the old pipe out of the way. and it's pulled through as you go. This does require excavations for both the insertion pit and the reception pit, so it's not as clean as the lining alternative. Manhole rehabilitations in the upper left is just, if you have room and the ability, you can remove and replace. For your brick manholes that are in good condition but are starting to show wear, epoxy lining is a good recommendation because it seals up the grout in the brick from the corrosive environment. And the application of the lining is shown in the upper right, and the finished product is shown in the lower right. And then the photo in the lower left is just a removal and replacement of a casting. Castings over time with the cars and the loading that they see can themselves wear down and need to be replaced, but also the seal between the casting and the manhole in that area can tend to deteriorate with the sewer gases over time and can cause seal and I&I problems right there. So overall, the sanitary sewer master plan will provide an overview of the existing conditions. It's going to identify the system challenges, similar to what we've laid out, but also in specifics in the specific need to collect additional inspection and observation data within the sewer. It's going to identify the necessary repairs and rehabilitation and maintenance needs for the first 5 years, which is the first implementation period, and then it will identify some projects for the additional 5 years, but not program those. As we continue along on that, we will, Wayne will report back.
Yeah, we've just received the initial draft master plan. Staff's looking at that. Of course, there are various scenarios that we'll study similar to the water plan that you've seen. And of course, there's going to be a financial plan developed with that also. So yet to come, within the next several months.
Yeah, the master plan feeds into a rate study because you have to determine, okay, we've got a 5-year capital improvement plan. Do we have the resources to undertake that plan? If not, then you need to determine what will it take in terms of a rate adjustment to generate the revenue to meet these obligations. And I can tell you that we will need a rate adjustment. There's no question about it. We're right on the edge in our sewer fund. In fact, we're replacing the Ironwood force main this year, which is a huge undertaking, and that pretty much exhausts the available resources in that fund. So we will need to look at a rate adjustment, but it will not have nearly the impact that a water rate adjustment, because the base rate is much lower. So you could increase it 25, 30, 40%, and the actual impact to the consumer is relatively small. That's the good news.
Great. Questions going forward on this? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. That concludes our meeting tonight. Before adjournment, are there concerns or comments? Motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Coops?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.